The cooking merit badge is one of the most difficult to do and probably one of the most time consuming in Boy Scouts. However, I'm going to be splitting this video off into three different segments because requirement 1 through 3 is about things to do before you cook, like safety, nutrition, cooking basics. Requirements 4 through 5 are actually cooking at home and cooking at a campsite, and those each have 5 and 8 sub requirements. And then requirements 6 through 7 is about trail and backpacking meals and food related careers. Hey guys, Matt Guzman here, back with a new video, and today's going to be about how to get the cooking merit badge, part 1. Now, these first few requirements, 1 through 3, are going to be about pre-cooking, which is nutrition, health and safety, and cooking basics. So, to do this merit badge, it's probably easier if you know what the requirements are before you start, so you can plan ahead on which requirements you're going to do and how you're going to do them. But let's get right into the video. The first requirement is about health and safety, and I want you to do the following. 1A. Explain to your counselor the most likely hazards you may encounter while participating in cooking activities, and what you should do to anticipate, prevent, mitigate, and respond to those hazards. So, that's kind of similar to something in emergency preparedness. So, you don't need to have the emergency preparedness merit badge, but it's good to understand what you're supposed to be doing here. 1B says to show that you know first aid and prevention that could occur while preparing meals and eating, and need to include hazards like burns and scalds, cuts, choking, and allergic reactions. So, as you can see, this falls under the line of first aid, but you don't need to know the first aid merit badge. However, it's good to have knowledge of it. So I've actually made a video before how to get the first aid merit badge, and I'll put that link in the description because it was on my other channel. So that's it for the first aid part of the cooking merit badge. Now, this is about safety. Describe how meat, fish, chicken, eggs, dairy products, and fresh vegetables should be stored, transported, and properly prepared for cooking. Because a lot of them are specific answers on why you should prepare it a certain way or why you should store them a certain way. For example, the most common way to store and carry food on a campout is by using a cooler. When you're using the cooler, you want to make sure it's cleaned out so you can safely put the food in, and also an easy carry. So if you're trying to transport it to someone else, you can easily get it there, or like if you're putting it in a trailer or in the back of a car. One other good thing to keep in mind is the separation of foods, especially to do with meat, and more specifically poultry, because chicken can cause diseases like salmonella, and also it's unhealthy if you thaw it out and like the water gets into other foods. So you want to separate your meats from your other foods to decrease your risk of getting sick. And after you do that, you want to explain how to prevent cross-contamination among those and why that's important. 1D says to discuss with your counselor food allergies, food intolerance, and food-related illnesses and diseases, and explain why one who handles or prepares food needs to be aware of these. Now, food allergies is really important. As someone who has food allergies, I know it's important because something very bad could happen if I have an intake of something I'm allergic to. So if you're cooking, you need to be mindful of cross-contamination in general, but also because of food allergies. For instance, so let's say you have a spatula and you're cooking breakfast for your friends or your family to flip or cook something like bacon or eggs, and you're using this to make the eggs, and then you realize that you're also making chili in the pot here, so you want to stir that chili, and you use that same spatula that you use the eggs for, and you don't think it's anything wrong because you're just trying to get the food done, and you stir with that, and then you put it back and you keep stirring. And then you use that same spatula to continue using it on the eggs. And that's a form of cross-contamination because now bits of the egg are on the spatula. Then when you put it into the chili or something, now that egg stuff is in the chili. So someone who's allergic to eggs might get a reaction from the chili. Even though there's not eggs in it, there's traces of it. And it all depends on the severity of the allergy. So it's important to keep this in mind. Okay, so the last one for number 1E, it says to discuss with your counselor why reading food labels are important, and explain how to identify common allergens such as peanuts, tree nuts, milk, eggs, wheat, soy, and shellfish. So these are the most common allergies, and I have most of those too. So when I'm looking at something, if I may, the way I tell if I'm allowed to have it is one, not only do I look at the ingredients, but there's also another thing that I look at. So there's a milk that I have called Rice Dream, and it's milk, but it's not milk because there's no dairy in it. And if you look at the ingredients, it also shows that there is no dairy, and that's usually what milk is. But this whole product of the company is it being lactose free and dairy free for people like me who can't have dairy at all. And if you look, it says try some of its other non-dairy products. So that's what I did is I went to the store and I got some ice cream that was by the same company, and I got some dairy-free coconut milk ice cream. And if you look at the ingredients, it also doesn't have dairy, it just has coconut milk. However, if you look even more closely at this thing called allergen information, it contains coconut and produced in a factory that also produces soy, wheat, peanuts, and other tree nuts. Now, it's not as bad to where it would have an allergic reaction, but another thing I had before had the same thing and I did have an allergic reaction. So it's important to look at the allergen informations, especially for something like pretzels. If you look at it, pretzels is actually, most of them are made out of wheat. So you can see it says in bold letters contains wheat ingredients. So that's how you can usually tell if there's an allergen warning because it's at the bottom and in bold. That was it for number 1. Number 2 is about nutrition. It says do the following. 2A, use a MyPlate food guide or the USDA nutrition model and give 5 examples for each of the following food groups. And those following food groups are fruits, vegetables, grains, proteins, and dairy. So again, I want you to have 5 examples out of each of those. So I'll help out a little. I'll give 1 example for each. Some common examples of a fruit are oranges and apples. Vegetables, probably like broccoli or carrots. More common version of a grain is probably bread because that's what people usually think of, or something that usually has wheat or something like that because you can easily cook it. And bread also goes with a lot of other things like bacon, and another protein is eggs. So eggs is a protein that can go with it, and you can cook that. And if you look at the ingredients of the bread, some of them actually contain milk. So speaking of milk, that is a dairy. So milk is obviously a form of dairy because it's usually like whole milk. And those are just some examples from the 5 food groups. 2B says to explain why you should limit your intake of oils and sugars. Pretty simple, you just know it or you don't. 2C says to determine your daily level of activity and your caloric needs based on your activity level. 2C also says, based on the MyPlate food guide, discuss with your counselor an appropriate meal plan for yourself for one day. 2D says to discuss your current eating habits with your counselor and what you can do to get healthier based on the MyPlate food guide. So I used to eat like junk food all the time. I used to eat a lot of chips and not really so much candy, but just things that I shouldn't really be eating as much. So I've been eating more healthier, not really just like, oh, I'm gonna eat lots of salads now. It's just I'm not eating as much what they call junk food as before. And if I do eat junk food, I'm not gonna eat like a whole lot in one day. So that's what my eating habits were like and how I fixed it. And finally, 2E, it says to discuss the following food label terms. Now, these are usually on the back of boxes. It says nutrition facts, and they're calorie, fat, saturated fat, trans fat, cholesterol, sodium, carbohydrate, dietary fiber, sugar, and protein. And just so you can see what I'm talking about, this box here shows the nutrition facts and it has things like calories and cholesterol. So just something like this that you can explain. Also, E says to explain how to calculate total carbohydrates and nutritional values for 2 servings based on the serving size specified on the label. If you look this up on Google, you'll most likely find things that'll translate for you and convert it so you know like what the serving sizes are for the 2 servings. That's done with number 2. And the final requirement I'm going to go over in this video is requirement number 3 about cooking basics. And it says for 3A, discuss each of the following cooking methods. For each one, describe the equipment needed and how temperature control is maintained. Now, I found most of these in the Scout Handbook. Now, for those cooking methods I'm about to list, you also need to name at least 1 food that can be cooked using that method. And those methods are baking, boiling, broiling, pan frying, simmering, steaming, microwaving, grilling, foil cooking, and the use of a Dutch oven. Now, I will say this, a lot of these things are interchangeable. Like, a lot of things can be either pan fried or microwaved, or a lot of things can be simmered and steamed. So, you need to actually know the difference between them and which foods are better to be cooked on which method. So, that one might be a little harder, but if you have the Scout Handbook, it is in the cooking section there. Number 3B says to discuss the benefits of using a camp stove on an outing versus a charcoal or a wood fire. Now, I'm not going to give away the answer, but I am going to give away something that should be obvious. A camp stove is usually small and you can bring it with you and pack it somewhere like in a trailer and you can just easily take it out. However, it is small. A wood fire does take a lot more work to produce and maintain, but it is bigger. So that's my hint for that one. And the last requirement, number 3C, describe for your counselor how to manage your time when preparing a meal so components for each course are ready to serve at the correct time. Now, this is a biggie. This is time management when cooking, and it's very important because you need to know what foods require what amount of time, how long you're supposed to cook it for, and you need to take into account all different things like temperature, or if you're supposed to stir something, and time management is very important, especially if you're multitasking, because the last thing you want to do is burn the food, or even worse, burn something down, like cause a kitchen fire. So here's just a mini compilation of when I was cooking with my brother to get one of the requirements done. As you can see, it's like almost 9 and we're trying to make it before 10. So we're washing our ingredients first and then getting some more so we have what we're actually going to be cooking. We're making sure it's out. Then we're making what we're going to do, which is pancakes. Time check to make sure we're managing our time. Overlaps of what we were cooking. And then putting our dishes away so we're keeping a clean kitchen setting. And then cooking the bacon in the microwave, which is a cooking technique, and then getting done before 10. So, whenever you're cooking, it is very important to know your time and how to manage it. Thank you for watching my video on how to get the cooking merit badge part 1. Now, in my next video, I'm going to cover what you should do when you're actually cooking. This video is mainly about pre-cooking things like basics or nutrition. And if you did enjoy this video, please like it, turn on notifications on my channel, and I will see you all in the next cooking video. Bye!